modifications in the past since 2008, 2009 era. So I'm very familiar with the package. Um, and it's something that I would be more than happy to just assist anybody that's going through this difficult time right now, and just be safe. And with all these payments, if you can make a payment, continue making payments, of course, but speak to the bank, find out what they're offering, because everybody's different. Even though my
And
friend has
thank
Chase and I have Chase, it doesn't mean that the investor is the same. You said something,
thanks.
Gennady?
Yeah, what I was going to say is absolutely thank you. Now, and I want to use that information to dive into the topic at hand, because what we believe is essentially going to happen is that because of these deferments, because of these forbearances, we don't believe that people are going to get back to their jobs as quickly as we would hope to be able to make up some of the payments that some of these lenders will require you to make on that fourth, fifth, sixth month in order to, again, become current on your loan. So what's going to happen here is that lenders now are not going to accept, unless there's another executive order that we're not aware of yet, or some sort of direction to the lenders, whereby the lenders are going to be forced to accept any payment from a borrower, even if they are over 3 months behind, if they can't catch up. Because currently and in the past, the way it has operated is that if you are over 3 months behind, the lender will no longer accept from you a 1-month mortgage payment. Now, what needs to happen in order for you to become current at that moment is you have to make up those 3 mortgage payments and pay for the next month, which means that you're coming up essentially with 3 to 4 mortgage payments in order to become current. Most households cannot come up with that type of money on a quick enough timeline to be able to bring their loan current. At that point, now you are beyond the 90-day period. Now you are behind on your payments. Now you are receiving foreclosure notices. And this is where we see things progressing, unfortunately, whether it was intended or not. But we see that it's going to be there, and it's going to go there similar as it was in 2009, 2010. But right now, we want to make sure that all of you out there that are watching and participating are going to be educated in this area enough to make sure that you know what to look out for, and you know how to proceed with this field. So let's jump into some of the content here that we have. If we're going to talk about Mr. Yuriy Moshes himself, which I'm going to briefly discuss, he's on the line with us over here. Yuriy, say hello to everybody in your audience.
Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well with their families.
Thank you. What's up? How you doing, David? Thumbs up from you. So basically, Yuriy and the team has been practicing in the foreclosure arena since 2010, basically since the market collapsed the first time. This, I guess, century, you could say. And we've done probably many foreclosure files, and we've represented many foreclosure homeowners. We've represented many short sale buyers and sellers. And this is kind of what we grew up on in terms of the legal field. We've been practicing in this area, and we have been litigating these foreclosures since that time in 2010. We are continuing to do so. So we've had a lot of experience in dealing with almost every element of foreclosure and short sale that you can really come across. In a nutshell, I mean, our firm practices in a variety of areas. Most important to what we're discussing here is going to be the foreclosure and the real estate arena. So this is basically the outline that we're looking at. The most important thing is for us to understand kind of where we are, where we were prior to this entire epidemic hitting, so that we understand where it may go. So if we were going to take a look at the recent numbers, and pulling up the Property Shark article here, that talks about some of the statistics within the 5 boroughs. Year over year, you see that, and I'm giving a shout out to Property Shark for their data and the use of it. You see the foreclosures they calculated went down by 6%, and pre-foreclosures slid down 7% year over year. But one thing to keep in mind here is that we were in a lot worse of a situation back then. So we're happy to see that these figures went down. But these figures are still nominal, 6%, 7%. We were still coming out of some times where, even though we were looking at one of the best economies that we can remember, we're only dipping by 6 or 7%. But look at this one, foreclosure in Manhattan went up by 39%, and this is as of the end of 2019. That's a big number. Bronx, there was the biggest drop in foreclosures there. That's essentially because Bronx is the new area. Everybody's looking to purchase there. That's where the remaining of the buyers are looking, because that's where prices are still unique or plausible. Queens has the most foreclosures. Staten Island foreclosures are still remaining at the similar level. And you see this zip code here in Brooklyn that's had more of the foreclosures as compared to the other boroughs, as compared to all the boroughs. The other figures that we're going to look at here is, and you'll see some of the calculations I made in the notes, that year over year, this quarter over last quarter, there have been some changes. For instance, I looked this up yesterday and last night. 2,648 new list pendencies were filed again in the boroughs in the last 3 months. These are pre-foreclosures. These are public notifications that there is a debt associated and an obligation associated with the property that this list pendant is attached to. That is how all of us come up with the opportunity and have the opportunity to find properties that are in a pre-foreclosure status. You can go on a variety of these websites that will provide you with lists of pre-foreclosure websites and properties. And basically, again, general definition, list pendants is public notice of a debt obligation that is attached to a property. So the first quarter, as compared to this quarter in up to 2020, the 2019 first quarter saw a 3945 list pendants. So we decreased this first quarter as compared to last quarter by almost 33%. That's great. Now we see that the foreclosure auctions were almost identical as compared to last quarter versus the previous quarter. And what that tells us the court is catching up. The court is trying to clear the dockets. The auctions are being pushed through. And what's inevitable to happen with the foreclosure property, it eventually does happen. And that's why here we have these numbers that are showing that. What we'll see as things progress in the next few months, we're going to start to see that because of the unfortunate situation, and this is also occurring, the court personnel are also falling ill. We have notifications there are judges in courts that are have been exposed to COVID-19 and are sick. That's going to put a burden further if, God forbid, this personnel doesn't get better and there needs to be changes in personnel once these restrictions are lifted. This is going to continue to add to the backlog of future foreclosure matters as the court and as the time progresses. We are looking back to the same times as we just got out because a health epidemic is causing this financial disaster, as opposed to what happened previously where the financial disaster kind of was a cause in and of itself. Here we have health that came in as a result. So let's talk briefly about what the foreclosure process in New York takes. Right now, it's about 1,100 days long. You're going to look to this to increase by the last quarter of this year, I believe. At the time when we were doing the drafting of this flyer that you're looking at, I believe it was about 1,800 days or so. Right now, we're at about 1,100 days to complete a foreclosure in New York. As you can tell, that is still almost 3 years. So we have plenty of time as homeowners if we're in foreclosure, as real estate agents if we're going to help these homeowners that are in foreclosures, and as investors if you're looking for opportunities out there in homes that may be lost inevitably in a foreclosure auction as well. The foreclosure process, basically, I'm not going to linger on it for too long. Let me see if there are any questions coming in. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing. Oh yeah, David. The actual Property Shark report, if you look, it's in the details of the Facebook Live event. I posted it there under resources. So that is where the Property Shark link is. So everything that I'm discussing is in the resource section of the Property Shark of the Facebook Live event. Thank you for that question. Foreclosure. Basically, the way a foreclosure begins in the state of New York is you're over 90 days behind. The banks begin to send you a foreclosure warning notice stating that you are in danger of losing your home. Then you have another opportunity where they tell you that your home is being may be pursued for foreclosure. Then you also have the acceleration that comes in usually at the 90-day period with the 90-day notice. So the 90-day, thank you, Inga. The 90-day notice will include the acceleration request, essentially requesting the entire amount due. Now, after the notices are sent out by the banks, you're going to have the foreclosure attorneys involved in the process now. As the foreclosure attorneys representing the bank are becoming involved in the process, there is a list pendants and they're filed against your property, essentially what we just discussed, showing that there's ownership or there's a debt obligation attached to this property. And then there is what's called a summons to complaint that is served on the homeowners, any tenants, or anybody that the plaintiff bank may determine has some sort of interest or financial interest in this property. Everybody that is served has an opportunity to respond to that lawsuit. Now, they can either respond with an answer, which they have 20 to 30 days, depending on how they were served, to respond with an answer. Or if they don't respond, they go into default, and then the process proceeds with the plaintiff going through the motion practice, which we will discuss now. Then you have foreclosure conferences. New York mandates in the boroughs that there are mandatory foreclosure conferences to try to push through mediation and some sort of loan modification or settlement to be reached by the parties. If there is no income coming into the household, there rarely ever is any type of settlement that is reached other than a short sale, which we will discuss moving forward and will allow Igor to dive into more, or whether it's going to be some sort of deed in lieu of foreclosure where you're passing the keys to the property over to the bank. Once the conferencing period in the court system is done, the next part is going to be the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment and appointment of a referee. Basically, that's where the plaintiff and the foreclosing bank is requesting the court to make a ruling that there are no facts that are in dispute, that there are no issues left to be decided, and that judgment should be awarded against the defendants in favor of the plaintiffs, the bank, in order to proceed with the foreclosure process. There will be answers, there will be oppositions in that motion. If that motion is decided in favor of the bank, the process continues to another motion called the judgment of foreclosure and sale and confirmation of the referee's report. That is then decided, and then you have the foreclosure auction that is scheduled. That would be the last step. Now, like we discussed, about 1,100 days this takes from the time when the summons to complaint is filed. That means that you have plenty of time to speak and educate these homeowners on their ability to potentially open up a line of communication with the lenders to discuss opportunity and discuss options and how they can um, either become current or how they can open up a line of communication in regards to settlement. And that goes to the same thing that Igor Lipkin was discussing at the beginning of this video about right now, pick up the phone, speak to your lenders, speak to your creditors, see what relief is out there with them, because everybody has their own process. Everybody has their own way of dealing with this 90-day deferment that everybody's providing. So you want to make sure that you understand what your lender, what your creditor is going to do, and you are prepared financially for that at the end of that 90-day period. And the same will apply during the foreclosure period. We always recommend that if there is no representative representing the homeowner, that the homeowner constantly stay in contact with the lender, either themselves or through some nonprofit agency that is helping them out with the foreclosure type of situation. So most important part that we're all here for is, are you going to be able to sell a property that's in foreclosure? And the answer is yes. Just like any other property that you're going to negotiate to sell, a foreclosure is not that different. So what in essence is going to happen is, when the foreclosure property is scheduled for closing, and yes, the buyer can obtain a mortgage and a loan in order to purchase a foreclosure property. It doesn't stop the lenders from loaning to a buyer to purchase a property that's in foreclosure, as long as the most important part, that lien and that foreclosure is satisfied at the time of closing. So what's going to happen is the title is still going to be delivered free and clear, even if the homeowner, the seller, was behind on that loan from the beginning of the process. To you, the buyer, to you, the seller's agent, to you, the buyer's agent, it's irrelevant in terms of how long the property was in foreclosure, how long the client was behind for, unless and until, and I'll get to that point, you need to determine if this is going to be a regular retail sale or a foreclosure short sale, because your margins are too thin. And I'll explain that, and Igor and Yuriy will confirm that as well. So as long as title is cleared, and as long as after you obtain your payoff from the foreclosing lender, that after all debts and obligations are paid off to clear title, the seller has enough money to pay off that lender and all its obligations, you're still dealing with a regular sale as you're accustomed to. The only difference is going to be that the attorneys are going to be looking at the payoff statement. There will be late fees, there will be accrual charges, there will be interest fees that you and us as attorneys and the entire team representing the transaction will be aware of when you're viewing the payoff. Other than that, the transaction goes the same, and that's why it is so important for all of us and all the real estate agents and all the investors that are aware and that are in the business to understand that foreclosure properties are a source of income, whether you are a listing agent or a buyer's agent or an investor. And moving forward, these will come back on the radar at a much higher pace than we have seen in the last few years, which they have been declining. It is our opinion that by the last quarter, this pace will increase going upwards. Igor and Yuriy, is there something that you guys want to comment while we are on this topic of foreclosure and selling them, while I look at some of the comments that came in?
Unmute. Good. It's a process. It's definitely a process. I think one of the comments that came in was in reference to how long it takes to get into foreclosure. Technically speaking, I think it's 30 days after you miss your payment. The bank has the right to accelerate the loan. So in foreclosure, the process is fairly quick. Just the entire process, as Gennady mentioned, does take quite some time. You know, in the past it was 1,100 days, but now, as Gennady mentioned, I think news came out that several foreclosure judges in Kings County, for instance, have passed, unfortunately, due to this pandemic. And at this point, we will, everything will change as far as the courts go, and then you could expect that process to increase in time, just like it was back in 2008. Not only with an influx, but with a court system that could potentially was completely turned upside down by the volume of foreclosures and now missing of key personnel.
Good stuff, Yuri. Again, Gennady, great stuff also. I just want to comment a couple of things that I wanted to mention. And I've been doing these short sale negotiations for the firm for over a decade now. We have a full staff, full team to negotiate the short sales as well. But more importantly, it is again, like Gennady said, it is our opinion. But the short sale have been declining. We've seen that already. A lot of banks do not want to do a short sale. I believe Caliber in beginning of March 2019 stated that they're not doing any loan modifications. They're not doing any short sales as of March 2019. Now, everything can change due to the COVID-19. Guidelines will change. The government will step in, especially for the Fannie and the Freddie loans, FHA, like I was saying before. But it's lender, a servicer, and investor guidelines. So once we start digging into it and once we start opening, we will have a better understanding per case scenario. Some lenders, they say the client's too far behind, they'll not do a short sale. But for our aspect, and right now moving forward, every foreclosure client potentially can get some kind of relief through either a loss mitigation or through a short sale, which is where the real estate agents come in and the opportunity for you to, of course, help the client and find a new home and whatever the situation else. Gennady, would you want to jump into short sales or?
Yeah. So
okay.
I think this
What
is
is a
a
short
good
sale? I
segue.
guess.
I think this is a good segue.
Somebody had a question. Hold on.
Okay. Angel. So my brother called his lender and they did say that he could take advantage of the 30-day grace period, but month 4 he would owe all 4 months. He has Wells Fargo. However, also they mentioned possibility of putting it on the end of the loan, but my brother said he would have to see what it would cost him. I was wondering what type of cost would he incur? He said it would maybe taxes. Do you know what type of cost the bank can put onto a client if they did that? Well, the costs are going to be associated with taxes and insurance as well, depending on what your escrow account is like as well. So you'll have essentially at the expiration of the 30-day grace period, and I think that's what you meant to say. The 4th month will include taxes and insurance for those 4 months. So you've got to prepare to have these funds available if you are going forward with these forbearances, and if you're going forward with getting these 90-day grace periods, because you are going to be responsible for full 3 months of the forbearance, including all the other matters. Igor.
Okay. Yeah, real quick, Angel, thanks for sharing. David, I'll get right back to your question as well regarding deficiency judgment if it wasn't answered. But Wells Fargo, and I have a Wells Fargo loan also from one of the co-ops, and they stated that it's a 90-day suspension of the loan. And I mentioned this in the beginning of the segment, 90 days of deferment or suspension, and then everything is due in the 4th month. This is why my concern is, it's our opinion, that most people will start submitting a financial hardship package on the 4th month. And most banks take at least 30 to 90 days to review your package. And being that 42 states are currently affected, more or less, and the fact of the matter is that this is a crisis where the banks are not going to handle the paperwork that you submit to them as a homeowner to review your package and give you an answer within 30 days or within 90 days potentially. So my response to that is, if you do defer like Wells Fargo, make sure that on the 4th month do not default and pay all 4 months in advance on the 4th month. Pay it in full. If the Wells Fargo has not given you the hardship, either a loan modification is what they're referring to, where they put on the back of the loan, they could potentially belongs to Fannie or Freddie give you a longer deferment or up to 12 months forbearance, where some kind of payment arrangement will be made. Maybe not a full payment, but some kind of payment arrangement will be made. Okay, so just be careful. A lot of these loans are 90-day deferments, like I was telling everybody before. But it doesn't mean that you don't have to pay those 90 days or it's put on the back of the loan automatically. You have to apply for this financial hardship package, which is what we used to call loss mitigation, to submit for some kind of short sale or modification. Is the same form, is the 710 form that most of these lenders are using. And then they ask you for, your financial hardship letter as well as your finances in general.
Thank you,
So
Igor.
hopefully that
Let's,
answers your question. And Dave, real quick about the deficiency judgment. When we do a short sale, one of the benefits of a short sale, which we're going to jump into as well, is to waive the deficiency judgment for the sellers regarding the mortgage and release any liens against the property. That's kind of the pro and thing that for the short sales, it's very important to understand that the seller's incentive is to walk away clean, after selling the property without owing anything back to the bank.
all right, let's give the mic over to Mark Martha. He had a question in regards to one of the discussion topics. How you doing, Mark?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Actually, you guys processed a short sale for me before, and one of the issues that I remember having, I don't think it was on this case, but one of the other investment properties that I bought was I don't know if this is going to be around this time, but in 2008, it got delayed by a year or even more, 2 years, where the guy kept on saying, I have hardships. And because of this pandemic, it's such a different crisis than it was in 2008, which was like a financial crisis. And this is more of like a health crisis. Do you guys, and I know the law is not out, I just wanted your professional opinion because you deal with this every single day. Do you guys foresee the government coming out and saying something like, all right, we're giving people 90 days to catch up today, and then, we're going to give them some kind of leniency going forward, where we're going to, I don't know, give some kind of a forgiveness or modify the loan, like Igor was saying? I mean, again, the law is not out yet, but do you guys see something like that happening, considering the whole country is affected by this? Like in 2008, restaurants weren't shut down.
Yeah, what we anticipate is going to happen, and again, this is a guess for the time being.
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be some sort of support that is going to be provided by the administration to the lenders moving forward, and I believe that even currently the administration is already purchasing some of the mortgage-backed securities that are no longer being bought up on the open market, because of the immediate health effects that are having on the underlying financial situation of the world. Mm-hmm. So the government's already doing it behind closed doors. They're not really marketing that this is happening, but in essence, it's already happening. Furthermore, to that effect, is the administration going to print more money and provide homeowners with more relief or more time? I think if the past is any indication of the future as to how everyone is acting when there's a health pandemic and epidemic, I think you have to expect something. I think there has to be, and I think there will be, some sort of opportunity for a homeowner to apply for some other type of federal relief that may have to do with if they are in this crisis and if they're in this home foreclosure situation due to no fault of their own. But if they can prove that it has to do with COVID and being sick or not being able to work because of it, right, I think that there may be potentially some sort of program to provide relief to the homeowner to reinstate their loan. That may be possible. We're in such uncharted territory and waters right now that there's no telling what to expect. But they're doing things already that we can kind of take by example and consider that they're going to do something similar moving forward, because as we all know, all the physicians are saying, we haven't even reached the peak of this yet.
Yeah, and then and again, just your opinion based on. You answered the first part of that question, and then so do you think, and do you foresee that maybe what happened in like 2010, 2011, where a lot of guys like me started out, where there was just so many short sales and foreclosures that it didn't even make sense to invest. Because I remember like the first foreclosure I got, I was running around with it trying to make like $2,000 that somebody could buy. Do you guys see like I don't want to say, I never want to say real estate crashing, but do you guys see like a huge discount that is going to be happening? Because I mean, I'm already seeing it on like, just on Zillow and StreetEasy, where all these brokers are like $20,000 reduction, $100,000 reduction. Do you guys see that happening right now? Or like what happens kind of like in 2 years from now? That's where I'm going with this.
Absolutely. I think you can definitely speak a lot better as to the price reductions in retail properties that have been marketed for, let's say, the last 6 to 12 months. I think we could all agree on the notion that a lot of these properties, a lot of the listings that are being price adjusted or price lowered are the properties that we're seeking, you know, for that let's say goal of getting best price per square foot, or, you know, standing out in the community of being able to sell at the best price out there. So there was always an underlying goal to try to get not only for the real estate agent to provide their ethical obligation to the seller to provide the best deal that there can be, but also the market was blaring, the market was hot, prices were inflated. I think what's going to happen is I don't think you're going to see a price in the investment property adjustment too far low. The reason for that is because you have a lot of investors and a lot of mom and pops sitting on the sidelines right now since the last crash that didn't make it to the investment pool. Yeah, I see. Didn't make it to the investment pool of hitting it big, as we see all these courses telling us about how easy it is to do. So you're going to have a lot of these investors and a lot of these people that are jumping off the fence and jumping into the market. And I think those prices will be adjusted quite quickly. So those margins will be elevated, even if there's a lot of meat on the bone at first. I think that adjustment's going to happen very quickly for the people such as yourself and ourselves, of course, as possible investors.
Very
And
well.
on the same note, Mark, hey, what's going on, my man? Just want to make sure that you understand the financial crisis 2008 is a lot different than today, you know, health issues. Why? Because back then, everybody's getting 106% financing. So, you know, it's a totally different upside down world where people took a hit on the market, you know, financially in their pockets. I mean, now we got people dying, you know, and we got this, you know, issue where it's a totally different but very similar actions, right? The biggest difference is going to be that everybody's been obtaining mortgages for the last, decade or so, have been proving their income, have been, you know, making sure that income is, they could afford the mortgage payments. And granted, now that people are not paying rent and people can't get it, you know, not working, I foresee, like you said, in 2 years from now, mostly FHA loans or low down payment mortgages. If they do fall behind, they're the ones that are going to be short sales up first, because a lot of the other ones are put down 20, 30%. They're not going to let the property just go, or they're not going to have a lot of equity lost. They'll be able to catch up. And there will be a program, in my opinion, by the government to come out with some kind of $1 billion, $1 trillion plan to help the homeowners as the bailout plan.
I think they have to.
I think there's talks about that already.
Yeah, I think they have to at this point. And sorry, I don't mean to cut you short, but I just want to build up on something that you're saying and to get your opinion, because I know a few guys that are on the chat that me and you are one of the few that were actually around during those times. And I will tell you, and emphasizing again that this pandemic and what happened in 2008 is night and day. And from where I'm sitting, 2008 financially was a lot scarier. Like when Lehman Brothers collapsed and the whole world was going into foreclosure, you didn't see like the light at the end of the tunnel. Here, you at least know that like sooner or later, some kind of medicine will come out, a vaccine will come out, and things will slowly get back to it. But you didn't have your, the waiter out of a job, a restaurant closed down, people were struggling financially, but you didn't have like just a complete and utter shutdown of the whole entire economy.
It's like we've never seen before, right? This is unmarked time. Like this is uncertain. This is just, unclear waters at this point right now.
Yeah.
So another thing that we need to be looking out for is the lending and the credit crunch that is occurring right now as a result of this health epidemic that is forcing this crisis, financial crisis. Now, the credit crunch is that we are hearing that you have a big problem, lenders are having big problems with jumbos and non-QM loans. So in order for those loans to be provided, so even if they're going to be in the near future where people are going to want to jump on that investment bandwagon, there's going to be a little bit different financing requirements in order to obtain loans because, again, of the credit crunch. We haven't seen the entire extent of it yet, but already we know coming out of the gate on Monday, today, whatever, April 6th, we know that there are non-QM problems with loans that nobody's giving them out. And as far as jumbo loans, we also know that those loans are having some difficulty in closing. Not to say that they're not closing, but we know some lenders are having trouble because of there were appraisal issues, if you guys recall, prior to the executive order. And in terms of now, after the appraisal essential designation has been kind of cleared up a little bit, I'd be excited to see if some of that lending is going to clear up as well. Igor, did you want to respond to Kenny?
Yeah, Kenny, I was just gonna say the process is the same. If it's overseas investor or if it's any kind of investor, the only thing the bank asks for is to make sure that to verify proof of funds. You know, it has to be a bank that could be verified, or a line of credit from a mortgage bank or a banker in general, or a bank statement will suffice, as well as the LLC and the articles of organization. I mean, it has to be based here in the States rather than, it has to be verified. And the bank can decline, like a lot of times Wells Fargo has been declining a lot of these buyers for no reason whatsoever, just because it's a new LLC. But they could buy under their personal names as long as there's proof of funds. They could buy under LLC and corporations, whatever. The process is the same. If it's overseas buyers, or residential.
No reason whatsoever.
Just
I
a
hear
real.
myself.
Yeah, I heard you too. Also, really fast about overseas buyers. If just keep in mind that if you are on a separate issue, if you're buying without, and you're a non-illegal resident, you don't have a social security number, you're gonna face further consequences when you sell. So just keep that in mind if you're a foreign investor.
Thank you, Yuri. Mark, good question. I mean, along the lines of what we were just talking about, what have we seen? The situation and the situation of banks backing out of commitments, we've seen they were very unique in their facts. So I don't want to say that we have seen banks that have not funded on issued commitments. We have not seen that outside of normal circumstances. What we have seen recently was due to the fact that either the seller couldn't close because they couldn't sell their home, which was a contingency in the contract because of COVID, and real estate agents weren't able to go out there and weren't able to sell the property. So we have a buyer that is able to get out of that. And another situation is you have where quality control is being done by lenders prior to closing, and some parties are not, I guess you can say, still gainfully employed in terms of at the time of closing. So there are some issues that are arising there when quality control calls the employer and the employer says that, they're on furlough or something to that effect. So there are delays there. But we're not seeing banks pulling commitments. I think furloughs also, people that are on furloughs and that can't close as a result of it, for the most part, we're seeing that all parties are communicating and all parties are loosening up their adherence to deadlines and extending deadlines because everyone's on the same page. This is a house epidemic. We are very rarely right now experiencing situations where deadlines are very strongly adhered to, especially commitment contingencies. and application submissions on co-ops and condos. That is helping a lot of people because, again, otherwise, if people are out sick or if somebody else isn't able to proceed with their employment and their work, that will kind of throw a monkey wrench into the process. So those are the only other kind of situations that we're seeing. Not too much of banks not being able to fund because of quote unquote bank failure due to no fault of the borrower. So I hope that answers your question. Let's jump into short sales and kind of what it is. Let's define what a short sale is. Once I define what a short sale is and kind of what everybody's constantly licking their chops over when the topic of short sale comes up, is that essentially what you're doing is that I got everybody's giddy smile right now on camera. It's nice to see everybody smiling. What essentially happens is that you're purchasing, or the property is being sold for less than the amount that is owed on the property to the lender by the homeowner. So again, just to give it a brief, easy example, if the property has a $500,000 mortgage and you can only sell it for $300,000 because $300,000 is the most this property will go for, you do a short sale for $300,000. And the other $200,000, the difference between what the mortgage balance is and the amount that we sold it for at $300,000, which is that $200,000 difference now, that is an amount that is forgiven, no deficiency judgments. However, caveat, and I'm going to bring this up right now, and I'll allow Igor to take it away, the cons and pros of it. Is the caveat of a forgiven amount on a short sale is that you still have to pay taxes on it. The taxes that you have to pay on the $200,000 that are forgiven are your regular income taxes, unless you have a great accountant that can provide proof of the fact that you are in heavier liability than you have income. I'm going to pass it over to Igor and Yuri right now for them to kind of jump on board and take this short sale discussion and process away.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Gennady. A couple questions I see. Steve Sergey said, understand the short sale opportunities are lender specific. So potential short sale opportunities per geographic region. I mean, coming up right now, it's hard to say. Like I said, the short sales they're going to be are those people that put less down payment. So whoever put the less down payment in any region for that matter will probably be hit first if they're not working, if they can't catch up on the payments, if they fall behind and essentially turn upside down. Because one of the key, key process of a short sale is that the lender has to approve a short sale. So what is the lender really doing, guys? The lender, when we do a short sale, they're giving you a payoff for less than what is owed. Okay, what does that mean? So like Gennady gave it a great example. If your house is worth, let's say, $500,000 and your mortgage is $600,000, you could do a short sale. If you're behind the mortgage and your house balance is $200,000 and your house is worth $500,000, there's equity in the property. It's a retail transaction. We just closed on a retail transaction. The guy was behind for 3 to 5 years, but had over $600,000 in equity. And we were able to close even though the property was in foreclosure. So a short sale, the homeowner has to be upside down. They have to have some kind of hardship. I mean, this moving forward, obviously everybody's going to have this COVID-19 hardship, but hardship could be anywhere from divorce, loss of income, health issues, anything of that sort, death in the family, death of one of the homeowners or an estate. So benefit for the seller is to walk away clean from the property. They haven't paid the mortgage in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. The benefit, and one of the biggest benefit is some kind of relocation. Back then, they were given anywhere between $3,000 and upwards of $48,000 is the most that I've seen on a short sale given on the paper, called the HUD, which is the settlement statement. So whatever's given allowed on the paper, that's what the homeowner is allowed to receive by the lender. authorizing them to get money from the transaction. Okay, so that's an incentive to relocate, to give you money to move. You have liens on the property that will be satisfied through the short sale. There could be, property back taxes. There could be credit card payments that are due that are currently already judgments and liens against the property. There are a variety of different, I guess, incentive pros for the seller to do a short sale. And one of the things is better than, let me at my own pace sell the property rather than get the knock on the door for the marshals to kick me out. Or worse, when the property goes through auction, the new owner comes in and says, "See you later." Okay, and the property is no longer mine. So typically, a short sale can take, let's see, anywhere between 30 to 90 days. The fastest I've done a short sale before was 14 days. It was through a litigation matter. So that's important to understand that a lot of people are afraid of short sales. They're afraid of foreclosures. It takes too long. I can't get it done. It's just a waste of time, which is actually not true. You just need to line it up accurately. What does that mean? The first step is to get authorization to speak to the bank to find out what is if the homeowner and what they're eligible for. Who's the investor? Who's the servicer? So if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, listen, I have this Chase is my bank. What does Chase do today?" Chase is just a servicer on that loan, for instance, or any servicer that we speak of that services the loan for the investor. And the investor could be a pool of investors, FHA, it could be a Fannie, it could be Freddie, it could be a private investor. Of course, the private investors, they have their own guidelines. They know the market sometimes. Sometimes they're Midwest and have no idea what the market is. And they count on you, the real estate broker, to price the property accordingly in order for the short sale to go through, right? So they're looking for you and your listing. So when you take that listing, make sure that you know if the property is in foreclosure, or at least if the client is upside down on his payments or not. Okay, ask for a mortgage statement. Ask for a payoff. Get the information to know where you are. If the property is worth, in your opinion, let's say $500,000, but at the same time, the homeowner says that he owes like 480 and it's close, potentially that is a short sale. Okay, because the closing costs won't fit into the purchase price. Okay, very important to understand. And if any more detailed questions, of course, you could ask. Okay, the idea of the short sale, okay, is that we negotiate it. It could take 30 days. It could take 90 days. But you, the realtor, we need your help to list the property. Without the real estate agents, there is no short sale. You cannot demonstrate a short sale without having the property listed on some kind of MLS, okay, or Rebney or whatever the market, to show the bank that you're actually trying to market the property, okay. And one of the most important things on the short sale side for you to be able to close is to identify if the property is for an investor to purchase overseas or in the States or whatever it is, or is it called an end buyer, meaning somebody who wants to buy for their family as an investment here, but at the same time will rent it out, now flip it, okay? And the reason I say that is because once you go inside the property and you see that the property is in decent conditions, the banks are not going to just let it go for pennies on a dollar. They will do their own BPO, broker price opinion, to make sure, or a full appraisal, or we have both BBO and an appraisal being done on a lot of these different FHA loans, to make sure that they're getting the right value for their property. The person who's buying the property will still get a discount. We've seen 10, 15% discounts on a lot of the properties, okay? But at the same time, the buyer has to understand that if there are liens in the property, and Yuriy does it well in his contracts, on all of our short sale contracts, the responsibility of whatever is not paid by the bank is on the selling side, the buying side. So that means that if the seller bank does not, pay for ECB violations or, some kind of judgment, or doesn't pay enough, the buyer got to pick it up a little bit and lay out money to purchase it. Okay, so you want to have a buyer who has confirmed a pre-approval letter or commitment of some kind, because they can get a mortgage. But what you don't want to do is line up a buyer or an end user buyer for a property that is for an investor where it's all gutted out. Okay, there are loans, 203K loans, rehab loans, which take time. So it really, you have to make sure, and this is one of the most important things when I speak to realtors, is to line up the property with a proper, appropriate buyer. Because if you don't, and you have the investor who's trying to buy that property where the bank is not going to give you those numbers and not enough meat on the bone, we're wasting our time. And vice versa, if you have an end user who's trying to buy a property that cannot get financed for a mortgage, and they're relying on that mortgage financing, again, we're all wasting our time. Okay. So moving on, once we speak to the lender and we find out the guidelines, if they want us to negotiate through some kind of a Fannie Mae portal.
Hold on, Igor. Why don't we open it up to see? I think Mark had a question.
Sorry, I don't see the chat.
I think David had a question.
Okay.
Anybody?
Let me see the questions.
No questions.
Okay, so
I mean, we're basically.
What are the questions? I'm sorry.
Okay, let's David's question. So can you only do a short sale if the property is upside down? I heard that you can do one even if the property is worth more than the loan, or is that a myth? Yuriy, Igor?
So again, if it's close enough, it's a short sale, right? If you don't have enough for the transfer taxes, if they're in, before you list the property as a retail or short sale, if they're behind, like I said, get a payoff. Find out what that means, how much behind they owe. I had a client who told me, listen, I owe $450,000. The property is worth seven and a quarter. And next thing you know, when we get a payoff, it's like $690, right? So $690 because they haven't paid in 5 years. They forgot to mention that part of it. But what they remember is $450 5 years ago. They haven't paid, and now it's $700 or $690, whatever it was, right? So now you got transfer taxes in New York, which is almost 2%. You have your real estate fee, which is 6%. So you're already at 8% right off the bat. It's going to be a short sale. Okay, where can you get a payoff? So the homeowner can just call the bank and order a payoff, or if you have authorization for the homeowner, you fax over the authorization and you order a payoff. That's the first thing that we do, is we get authorization from the homeowner to speak to the bank to find out where they stand. We find out who's the investor of the loan, right? Because we know a lot of different investors that you've never heard of in your life, but they buy a lot of these mortgage notes from Fannie and Freddie a couple of years back. And if we know who the investor is, we know kind of what the guidelines they're looking for. And we know that either they take 85% of the BBO, or they're taking 88% of the PBO value. So we kind of know and gauge as to what we can get on a short sale. So, that's kind of, I guess our experience in that field.
And generally, sorry.
Go ahead, Yuriy.
Generally speaking, I think it's good practice to and then we recommend to our realtors is when a client tells you that they're in foreclosure, no matter when they tell you how much they owe on the property, I always urge them to get a payoff, because at the end of the day, if the client, if the seller sells his house and has to come out with money out of pocket, it's always a negative thing. And fingers get pointed in all directions in that kind of scenario.
Okay, that's good. That's good advice there. Any questions, guys, at this point, real quick, before we jump in more into short sales? Yeah, Dave. Yeah, get Yuriy. Good night. Do you want to unmute him?
All right. First of all, how are you guys doing?
Good to see you, brother.
Thank you. So I have a deal in Queens right now where one of my agents has a deal with a homeowner who wants to do a short sale. The house has equity in it. But the thing is, there is 2 people on the mortgage and one is not cooperating, right? So I know in order to do the short sale, both people on the mortgage have to actually be on the same page, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And when you say equity, how much equity are we really talking about? Like I
About
said, if it's
300,000.
how much,
300,000.
it's not a short sale. It's there's no way the property will go for a short sale when you got so much equity in the property. Unless the property no longer is there and it's just land, then you're just selling land, right? But if the equity, there's a lot of equity in the property, and you say 300,000, get a payoff to be certain as to exactly how much equity we have. Then add at least 10% on the selling side. That's cost of between the real estate broker fees, the attorney fees, and the transfer taxes, right? More or less, a lot of people who are not paying their mortgage, they're not paying their other bills as well.
Correct.
Okay, which means that they might have other liens against the property. We've seen judgments against divorce cases, child support, so that could get taken care of part of a short sale. But when you got $300,000 in equity, brother, most likely you will not get a short sale. The bank, when they do the broker price opinion, they'll say this property is worth X. You owe us Y. It's a lot less than what you owe us. Pay us in full.
Mm.
And yes, you do need cooperation from all the mortgage note holders in order to facilitate a transaction. And that's only for a short sale, because if you have the equity and there's two people on the mortgage note, but there's one person on the deed, let's say, and that the person on the deed is cooperating, if you have a retail transaction, all you need to do is get a payoff, and whoever is on the owner of the deed or the person who's owns the property, they could just facilitate a regular retail transaction. So you might not need the second mortgage note holder, just get a payoff. Damn, good question, Dave. Any other questions that I missed?
Nope, you got them all. I believe we're going on
Okay.
moving forward. Taking us away.
Okay. I see Kyla said, how long does it take to get approval from the bank for the price on the property? Great question. So as we jump into it, we submit the package of a short sale. So people say, oh, let's submit the short sale right away. It doesn't work like that. You have to make sure to get authorization from the homeowner, speak to the bank, and find out which investor you're working with. And depends on the investor. Some of them already may have done a drive-by or can tell you, hey, we did a broker price opinion drive-by on this property, and we think it's worth X. Okay, and that's how you would know right off the bat what the bank is looking for. At the same time, if you disagree with that value, I would recommend say, no, the value is wrong. The realtor said the listing price should be Y. And you would have to prove why you think the property is worth less. First and foremost, they're looking at your listing. So if you're listing this property as a retail transaction and then changing it to a short sale, you're giving the bank ammunition to say the property is already worth more, because that's what you listed it for, because they're looking at your listings. Oddly enough, some banks actually just look at Zillow and they say, oh, Zillow says, which is absolutely insane that they even do that. But once we submit the authorization, once we submit the listing agreements and submit the financial hardship letters, and by the way, we take the homeowner by their hands and work with them throughout the whole process to make sure that we're negotiating with a lender and we're communicating with them. So that way you could step aside and do your business on a retail transactions. You could do your more listing side. We work with our negotiator works with your homeowner to make sure that all the documents, all the T's are crossed. We get the hardship letters, we get the financials, we get all the documents that the bank require. And then once we have the documentations, we really need an offer in order to proceed with a short sale. But as Joan said there, what is the value? Some banks will allow you to do what's called the broker price opinion before submitting the offer and let you know that, hey, this is what we think the property is worth. So, it all depends on the lender and the servicer and the investor of the transaction. If we don't get that information, we can still submit a short sale based on our opinion, and your opinion rather, of what you think the property is worth. So within 30 days, I would say usually we'll get a price of a property and we'll know where the bank stands. Now, it doesn't mean that that's where the value of the property is going to be, or that's what the short sale approval is going to be. And a property that's worth 500, the appraiser could come in and say it's worth 475, but there's no pipes in the property potentially, or it got mold everywhere. So a buyer can give us some ammunition, inspection report. helps us negotiate with the lender to say, listen, we think the value of the property is even less than 485. We think it's 4.25. Potentially their own appraisal that shows 4.25. A GC, a general contractor's report, because our mission is to facilitate a short sale to make sure that both the seller and the buyer walk away more or less happy and the transaction closes. If the lender thinks the property is worth X, we think it's worth Y, we got to negotiate and come somewhere in the middle. Okay, so a very important factors is you give us ammunition to negotiate. You give us the general contract, get your contract in there. You might have to spend a couple of dollars to do an inspection to get the contract, because you will get 10, 15, 20% below market value. Or if the property really needs a lot of work, I've had a property in the Bronx, you could look at it and you see the backyard from the front of the house, right? Just beams. And it was sold for like $70,000 on a $400,000 property. It was an investor deal and nobody's giving you a mortgage on that. It was a great transaction for our investor that we worked with. And again, every transaction is different. Identify the actual property. But good question regarding the, let's see if there's any other questions here before I continue. All right, how much do you, short sale day, we talk about that. What is the new rules for FHA loans, 37 days submit the short sale package? Another great question, Natalia. So it's been the rule for forever with Fannie and Freddie, that they need at least minimum of 37 days to submit a short sale before an auction sale date. I think that's what you're referring to, auction sale date, if I'm not mistaken. So no, that's not what you're talking about. So usually if there's a sale date coming up, let's say next week, the bank says, I need to see the package submitted, the short sale package, including the listing agreements, the MLS data sheet, proof of funds, a pre-approval letter, contract of sale with a down payment of funds of some sort, a HUD-1 to show how much the bank is going to net. Because remember, a gross price is not how much the bank is going to walk away with. The bank needs to see how much money they're making on this transaction. And then they could determine if, they'll send out their appraiser or the PBO and figure out if the numbers make sense, or we could, kind of negotiate back and forth with them. The 37-day rule is if somebody's, let's say, has an auction coming up and they will not postpone the sale date because they will not review or postpone the sale date sometimes because there's an auction coming up less than 37 days. So therefore, we need at least 37 days to submit from prior to the auction happening, rather, okay? There's a couple ways to stop the auction. Gennady was speaking about motions before. There's a motion you can file. A client can go ahead and just file an emergency bankruptcy, but we're not here to give them, that's on them if they wish to do that. And that's kind of stops the whole foreclosure and gives you a Band-Aid at the current moment. Does that answer your question, Natalia, more or less? Okay. Let's see, any other questions at the moment? Okay, all right, moving on. So we submitted the short sale package. We speak into the banks, you negotiate with the banks. The more ammunition you guys can provide and the buyers can provide comps to support the value that you think the property is worth. I encourage the investors or the homeowners or the realtors to meet with the broker price opinion agents or the appraisers to show them all the issues with the property in order that they can accumulate, kind of give you the right comps, bring the comps to them so they can give the right value of the property. Feel free to tell them what contract price we have for this property that we're trying to negotiate for, so they have an idea. So you show them that, and any inspection reports, and they're there to help us to facilitate a short sale also. But they're telling the banks what they think, in their opinion, what they think the property is worth. Okay, so moving forward, once we have the value, we know what the bank wants, we know what we need to get. We negotiate, and we continue to negotiate until we get approval. Okay. Once the loan is approved, a short sale loan, they usually give you 30 days if you're a cash buyer, or 45 days if you're getting a mortgage to close on that transaction. Okay. So the mortgage should have been lined up already. At the very least, submit it, get a commitment. Title report should have ran prior to, and we make sure that once we enter into a contract, that the title report is ordered right away. Before we submit the whole settlement statements and the whole HUD-1 to the banks, we want to make sure that they're going to be some title work done and to see what other liens against the properties, because we could include into the short sale negotiations, like I said, any kind of judgment. We've had $200,000 ECB covered through the short sale. We had different type of credit card judgments, repossession judgments, child support paid. Sometimes you have a first lien, and then you have, very popular back in 2008, was a second lien, right? You got 80/20s, and the second lien gets paid by the first lien through the short sale. So we negotiate the second lien or third lien. I mean, I've seen cases where there are seventh and eighth liens on the properties, restitution, and sometimes IRS taxes are owed, and that can be lifted if the seller is not making any money. It can be lifted through the short sale process. So there are a lot of pros for the seller to assist them through this process. I see Ruslan has how does the bank determine how much moving assistance or relocation is what he's referring to can be given to the seller? There's really no way the bank can advise you of that, right? You kind of just submit the HUD-1. You put 3,000, which is common today. 10,000 was common during the Obama administration with the HAFA loans. Like I said, we had sometimes there was part of the HAFA, the Home Assistance Financial Assistance program back in the Obama administration, is that they were giving you like a letter saying that you could get approved up to X amount of dollars for relocation if you apply for some kind of assistance now. So they were kind of giving guidance back then. Rule of thumb now is about 3,000 to 10,000. I had a client that I just did a short sale for about last month. He got 20,000. It was one of those settlements through the attorneys, and they were able to say, $20,000 is what they agreed to. But we could put 50,000 on the HUD-1. We could put 20,000, put 100,000, and then the bank will tell you reduce it to X or Y. Okay, so they'll let us know how much they're willing to pay as a relocation. And remember, if the seller doesn't live in the property, most of the time they'll either get a very small relocation or no relocation. Okay, because relocation means you're relocating, and if you don't live in the property or it's vacant or it's abandoned, most likely you will not get any relocation money. But sometimes you do get that incentive by the lenders, so it's really case by case specific. Okay, hopefully that answered everybody's questions so far. Anybody else have a question while I keep going?
Yeah, Igor, Natalia wanted to know why investors are denied short sales. Well, Natalia, if I understand your question correctly, there's actually two responses to this question. One response is lenders have what they call a blacklist. Their blacklist is of entities and possible purchasers of short sales that they will not do a deal with because of one reason or another. So that is something that they include on their blacklist. So that is one reason why a lot of banks have this blacklist and will deny a transaction with a particular entity or individual. Now, another reason maybe as to why an investor is denied a short sale is because the investor wants a figure that is too low as compared to what the lender is requiring to receive at a minimum as a net figure. A lot of times, and that's why Igor brought this very valuable point up, one of the most important elements of marketing a short sale is knowing who to line up your short sale with. Is it an investor that you need to line this property up with? Or is it an end user, a family that's going to move in and live in it as if it's their primary residence? It's a big difference between which one of these parties and types of parties is purchasing, because it's going to be a big difference in the type of condition of that the property is in, the type of discount that the short sale lender is going to award, and the price that the property is going to be marketed for. So that's in essence kind of my my response to that question. Another thing that I just wanted to touch up on before Igor jumps back into this is kind of to give a general synopsis, a bird's eye view of what we're trying to do here. The bird's eye view of everyone that's on with us right now is that if you are looking at more and bigger opportunities to expand your lead source and you expand your ability to do business in a tightened market, we are trying to provide you with the ability and education to obtain foreclosure and short sale deals moving forward, because that is going to be another source of revenues for you in light of the market that we are going to be able to come out of this into. Everything else that is encompassed and made part of a short sale negotiation and application, that is what we are for. That is what other typical organizations, law firms, and associations are for. The goal is for you as agents and investors to understand what you need to look out for in order to understand and notice that you are dealing with a potential short sale, and that yes, you can still sell this property even if, or you can purchase this property even if it is in foreclosure, the lender is owed more money than the property is worth, even if the property is scheduled for an auction sale, not now because there's a freeze, after the freeze is lifted, even if there were previous auction sales scheduled, you can still have the opportunity to purchase this property, sell this property as a listing agent, or represent the buyer in the purchase of this property. Igor, I'm going to hand it over to you because I've got somebody that just came to visit me in the background, and they're going to make a lot of noise, my little boys.
All right, thanks, Gennady, for that. Kayla, question: do the lenders provide funding relocation if tenant occupied to assist in relocation of the tenant? Yes, they do. Same idea, relocation if the home is owned by is tenant occupied. They can give relocation instead of the sellers to the tenants, and we've had that situation in the past. A lot of times the buyers will buy it with the tenants in the properties because they're getting a good deal. Like I said, if I'm buying a property for myself and I get a 10% below market value or 15% below market, where properties are sometimes inflated or a little bit above market price, then I will, kind of make whatever is necessary to obtain that property, pay some of the seller's closing costs, buy it with tenants, or, do whatever it takes to get that property if I can. A lot of times we get issues, like I said, where you got to identify if it's an investor property or if it's an end user property. And you can start with an investor if you feel that, just to get a price. And then once you know what the bank is looking for, we have to be able to get out of the contract. So one of the things, Yuriy, maybe you want to jump in real quick and just mention about the contract. What are the clauses in the contract that you put to protect our sellers, the homeowners, in order to, make sure that A, if the buyer is unrealistic with their price, that we're able to get out of the contract, and B, speak a little bit about arm's length transaction on in your contracts, which is mandatory as well.
So something that actually Igor mentioned that, and I previously said as well, is the fact that if your seller is coming out selling the property and has to come out with funds out of pocket, it's just a bad look for everyone involved. Therefore, the contracts, the short sale contracts in general, whether mine or anyone else's who practices in this area, are pretty specific. They're not similar to what, in the sense they are similar to what a regular transaction contract is. However, the differences are pretty major. Number one, I always, when the realtor comes to me with a buyer for a short sale, I ask him whether this buyer understands that they're buying a short sale and they have realistic expectations as far as what a short sale is. Because, let's say you're buying a property in New York City and there's the, DOB violations, all of those good things that are attached to the property. Obviously, the seller's not going to be inclined to remove any of those violations or take care of any of those issues. To remove those violations, and therefore the buyer would have to purchase the property subject to the violation. Unless sometimes, as Igor mentioned, there's tenants on the property, and the seller in the contract makes a representation that they're going to be selling it in the pure as is condition form you could think of. So not broom clean and vacant, but subject to any tenancies that occur. And finally, the other thing that I always make sure that's in these contracts, and then it's always in my contract, and I fight for it pretty aggressively, again, because the buyer has to understand what they're coming into, otherwise they're wasting a lot of time, is the fact that in the event that there's any additional funds that are needed, as far as, let's say, I don't know, the bank decides not to approve water bill that's outstanding, that the seller is not going to credit them back, $150 for water that was used for the last 3 months. Instead, the buyer is going to be taking it subject to this open water lien. The other thing Igor mentioned is an arm length transaction. So, we used to get these phone calls all the time saying, "Look, my brother is in trouble and wants to sell his property, and can I buy from him as a short sale?" Well, the bank makes you sign an affidavit at closing stating that this transaction is not an arm length transaction, and the same thing we are mandated to put into these contracts stating that in fact these transactions are not arm length transactions. So you can't sell it to a family member, to a cousin, to a business associate. This has to be a purely a transaction that's purely a real transaction, and not done to hide another, to hide it for the seller to stay on the property. Because also sometimes with the affidavits that you do sign at closing, it does state that the seller will have to be moving out of the property at closing. So it's pretty restrictive. Well, when the bank is giving is deciding to take less money, they have to make sure that there's no funny business going on the side. What else did I want to add to it? I'll turn it back to Igor in a few minutes. I just wanted to expand. I know we were talking quite a bit in the beginning regarding COVID and how it affects the marketplace. One of the things, since we're on this topic of contracts, is that I don't know if a lot of you started seeing, but I have, is something called a COVID-19 rider. It's a little unrelated to short sale, but just to expand, it basically states that in the event that somebody's health, who's a part of the contract, is affected, or their financials are affected due to the COVID virus, they have an opportunity to either delay the closing for a given amount of time. A lot of times I see it anywhere between 30 and 60 days, and then in the event that this whole mess we're into it stays affected, then they have the right to terminate. Either party has the right to terminate the contract after another 30 to 60 days pass. So it's a pretty different world out there from what we're used to, but this is the way that we protect our clients as far as the COVID language goes. But closings are still taking place, and we're still, there's a lot of closings that are happening now via this new order for Governor Cuomo, then the remote notary, and the closings are still taking place there. They look a lot different than the virtual, but we're certainly still closing transactions. Igor, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Can you unmute me? Thank you. Good stuff, Yuriy. And one of the things I'm not sure if you mentioned, but there's also like a 90 days window from the contract day that on or about, if 90 days either buyer or seller doesn't get approved for a short sale, then we can get out of the contract. And the idea is that you don't want to stay in the contract for too long with a buyer that's unrealistic about his numbers, or unrealistic potential bank. We've had cases where the bank thinks the property is worth $600,000, and it was probably like 4.25 maximum type of transaction. So in that scenario, it was just unrealistic expectations from the selling side, from the bank side, and it did end up going through an auction. And funny enough, at an auction, sold for like $395 or $385. So go figure. And Ross, to answer your question, what about arm's length pertaining to listing agents? If you're talking about like a family member listing the property, that's okay. A family member who's a listing agent to buy the property, it's not okay. If that's what you're referring to, hopefully that answered your question. So short sale approval process, again, we've got the package, meaning we've got the listing agreements, we got the value of the property, we know what the property we're looking for, what the bank is looking for. So once we have the bank and they know what the net is from the bank side, then we could work the numbers backwards to figure out what the gross amount will be in order for them to purchase it. One thing I want to mention also is for end user properties and for end buyers, keep in mind they could get financing today with FHA or 3% down payment, 5% down payment, and we've seen cases where you could add your closing cost on top of the purchase price, and the value will come in. So you could add your 3% or 6% sales concession to cover your closing cost and help you with some of that cost. Okay, so that's important to understand on the purchase side as well. So the short sale, to 30 to 90 days, we usually get an approval. And again, once we submit everything, we're speaking to the blender, and that's important to always have that communication. You have to always speak to the seller. Okay, and that's what we do. We communicate with the seller, make sure that we know their expectations, right? So as the listing age, as the approval is coming clear, that we're going to get approved soon, you or the listing agent or the broker or the buyer's agent, whoever, you have to communicate with the homeowner, say, hey, and this should have been a conversation in the beginning is what we usually have. Where are you moving to? Where are you going? Okay, because then the seller goes, well, that's great that you got approved, but I got nowhere to go. So what do I do now? Okay, and it happens more than not. It's all about expectations. Okay, same thing on the buyer side. Hey, Mr. Buyer, we have almost an approval. You got to close in 30 days. Well, I haven't submitted a mortgage yet. So these are the issues that, when we working, one of the things that we do best at the law office of Yuriy Moshes is that we communicate with all parties, right? And many of you who work with us could attest to this. We put everybody in the email thread, the buyer's agent, the listing agent, the mortgage person, the sales attorney, everybody, to make sure that everybody knows every step of the way. And we kind of keep you updated throughout the whole process and say, look, we just got the value. The value came in at 4.25. Your offer is 4.25. We think we're going to get approved very soon within the next 30 days. Please submit for the mortgage and start working on a clear to close with your lender. So that's important for the buyers to understand. And then at the selling side, hey, we're about to close soon, maybe the next 30 to 60 days. Have you figured out where you're going to move to? You're going to move with the sister down south, how are you going to move out of this property? Because like Yuriy said, the property should be vacant. And as the short sale approval says, that it will be vacant upon delivery. When we do these closings, there's no adjustments. If once we submitted whatever the title was, those taxes now do a little bit more on the buy side. If there's any extra, a new lien came about, you can't change the short sale approval once the approval comes out, because then you have to resubmit, go back into underwriting, and the process starts all over again. So you cannot amend it. Same thing goes for like investors from different countries or investors in general. I want to buy it under my personal name. No, you know what? I want to buy it under the LLC name. That's a problem. You got to understand that it's a brand new buyer according to the lenders, and they will ask you to resubmit that. Is the listing agent allowed to purchase the property? Non-relative, no. Yeah, of course. The listing agent could buy the property. Sure. There's no problem with that. Next, so now that we have a expectation of what needs to happen, then we wait for our approval. And FHA has been the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, right now, or in the past couple of years, because FHA has an extra layer, which is the HUD. And the HUD has to tell you, sometimes FHA or the lender servicer allows you to do a short sale, but then when it comes to HUD, they'll stop it and say this particular loan does not qualify to do a short sale period. We've had cases where we've been working for a short sale for 3 months and 5 months and a year, and then all of a sudden, we just can't do the short sale anymore. Either too many submissions sometimes. And I think Natalia was asking about the investors denial. Listen, investors could deny for too far behind now. There's no guideline for any lender at the current moment to do one thing or the other. When it was clear during the Obama administration, you had these programs where they have to review it for a short sale. They have to review it through what's called a waterfall effect, modification, short sale, deed in lieu, and whatever other options available. But we have cases where it's sellers on board, property is perfect to be marketed. Call up the investor says, nope, we don't participate in a short sale. So you want to get that out of the way real quick right in the beginning, okay? So that way you don't go through this whole process and waste everybody's time not to get paid, okay? And guys, we don't get paid until the closing. So Yuriy Moshes puts his fee on the settlement statement, and whatever the bank pays him, that's what they pay him. Somebody asked, what is the listing side? How much can we charge? 6% is normal, is what a lot of the lenders are paying out, full 6% commission. I encourage you to give out as much, at least 50% of your listing, because end of the day, you want to get this property sold. I've seen banks like, different, I guess I already know the bank, the services like Round Point and other banks. What happened here? Round Point and other banks that, they may not give you full 6% if it's just one broker. If you have two brokers, they'll give you the full 6%, 4 and 2, and 3 and 3, or 5 and 1, or however you guys break it up between each other. So that's important to understand. And of course, during the short sale, once we get the short sale approval, we then go to the closing table. It's pretty dry cut there. Checks are cut. I mean, it's like a regular transaction at that point. Gennady mentioned in the beginning, there are tax consequences when it comes to short sales. So anything that they're forgiven and they don't have to pay the deficiency balance, okay, that can be taxed as a 1099. Okay, so they potentially can get a 1099. They hire the right accountant. I'm sure they don't have millions of dollars in the bank account. They could potentially file a claim on solvency and get that waived off. Dave has a question. I heard of homeowners who want to sell their deed as a commitment to sell to a buyer to purchase it. Is it legal or illegal? Okay. I mean, there's people that went to jail for selling deeds. Okay, let's start with that in Queens. It depends. Sometimes there's scams going on where people were saying that I'm going to get you a modification and then slip in a deed in lieu, or a quick claim deed real quick, and the deed all of a sudden is sold and the property is not theirs anymore. Okay, is it legal to transfer deeds? Usually these quick claim deeds are done with no monetary value. So, it's not like they're paying off the mortgage to do this. Okay. Legal or not legal, I'll let Gennady maybe answer that, but since I'm not an attorney, but it's you can transfer deeds, but if you're doing a short sale, the deed and the note has to match in order to do the short sale, put it that way. Okay. So, you have to transfer it back and it clouds the title and then it's an issue to sell the properties.
And look,
Okay.
the bottom line here is, David, the reason why the issue has risen in the past and continues to exist as to deed transfers is because you've got people that are taking advantage of homeowners that are unable to secure themselves. And essentially what tends to happen is that somebody's knocking on the door of a distressed homeowner saying that they can provide them with help and assistance and that they can save their home, and all they have to do is, for their obligation or for their help, all they have to do is transfer a deed to this hero's name or entity of choice, and kind of all problems will go away. Unfortunately, it's never how it works. When the homeowner transfers the deed out of their name, they cannot do a short sale, they cannot do a sale because the deed is no longer in their name. In order for any type of sale to happen moving forward, there will need to be a quitclaim deed, essentially transferring that deed and title back into the name of the original owner. So what happened in the past, and the reason why there's a lot of people that have had some trouble with this, is because they would purchase the deeds and they would do nothing with the properties, or they would do nothing to help the homeowners instead of just collecting rent payments from tenants in these properties. So that's why it's illegal, and that's why it's extremely looked down upon because of fraudulent misrepresentation, to say the least. Mark, to address your question, can I represent myself as a buyer and collect a broker fee? Well, that's more of an ethical question. That's not a question in terms of whether you can do so contractually. Contractually, I don't see that being a problem. Otherwise, I also don't see it being a problem if it is disclosed that you are a real estate agent as a buyer, and that as part of the bargain that you have negotiated, you want a piece of the listing pie. We've seen it, and I don't think that should be an issue.
Mark, as on an REO and an auction property, can you be the broker and purchase the property, sell it off, and you put a bid in, and you're also the buyer's agent? You can do that. We've seen that happen. You want to unmute him? Gennady has.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen me at the auction plenty of times. I do that all the time. But at auctions, it works very differently with REOs. But specifically with short sales,
auctions and REOs, I'm talking about.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, because like when you guys process a short sale, you are the agent.
We're
right?
one of the negotiators.
To what?
We're not acting as an agent. We're acting as a negotiating party. So you can have
attorneys.
3 or 4. Right. You can have 3 or 4 parties on the HUD or the approved HUD that are receiving any part of that 6% commission or 5% commission.
So have you seen this before? Because I've never done it, only because obviously I just want to buy the property. I never want to act as an agent for myself, so that like whoever's reviewing the file at whatever, Bank of America, for example, they're just going to be like, okay, this guy is, trying to dip his hand into.
It goes, yeah, I get what you're saying, Mark, and it goes back to the investor. If they feel that, hey, this guy's trying to dip into at the same time, and keep in mind, it goes to your brokerage, not really to your name. So it goes to whoever brokerage you're with, and that's kind of, it doesn't really have. I mean, you sign off as the agent. Don't get me wrong, right? The buyer's agent. You could be the dual agent or whatever the situation is. I mean, it's not unusual. It could be done, but if the investor doesn't want to do it, then they may deny you just for that reason. They may say no.
Right, because just like, I mean, you guys process this as a short sale, but before we bring it to you, we're dealing with the homeowner direct, and most of the time, I'm obviously introducing myself either as a realtor or somebody that could help them out of the situation that they're in. So if I'm already there, I'm just thinking to myself, like, again, emphasis, I've never done it before. But, when you're talking about most houses that we get in like Bed-Stuy, Clint Hill, and these neighborhoods that are, $1+ million, you're talking about $50,000 that I could be saving or making.
Well, here's the way it's going to be looked at. The investors that are going to be looking at the proposed HUD with all the expenses on there are going to make a determination as to whether they're going to be paying 5%, 6%, or if they notice that there is a buyer that is also the buyer's agent that they don't want commission to go to, they cut the commission on the seller side down to 2-3%. So there's not much to split. So
your advice is to basically stay in my own lane and keep doing what I'm doing and not put myself on there?
Yes.
Forget about the more morality. I'm just more of like, let's just get the deal done. And
yeah, I mean, if you're going to be the investor, be the investor. If you're going to be the broker, be the broker.
Right,
right. That's correct, because the bank is still going to cut the listing agent's commission if the bank sees that the buyer is also the agent.
Gotcha.
Again, these services and behind the services are potential, investors. They make the final decisions as to how and who and how much they're looking to net. So it really depends how much they spend on it. How much is it a countrywide loan? That makes a difference. Back then, right? So it was a subprime mortgage back then, and they bought it for X amount of dollars. It makes sense, right? Moving forward, it's a lot of uncertainty. Like I said, there's a lot of more people that have equity in their properties now. Even if they do fall behind, and within a year or two, they're not going to have. It's not going to be potentially not going to be upside down, right? Unless, of course, you're a small down payment, and that's what my opinion is, and our opinion is that the people with a small down payments and that barely have any equity, if they do fall behind because of this deferment, which I'm not really a fan of at this point, because I feel like people are going to fall into more debt, and they're going to be into a much bigger trouble when it comes to the 4th month, and you got to pay all 4 months right away, and they're not part of Fannie or Freddie loans. And by the way, there's a Google Fannie lookup, Freddie Mac lookup, and you can know if your loan is part of Fannie or Freddie Mac. All you need to know is the property address, the homeowner, and the last 4 of the social, and you'll know if they're doing Fannie or Freddie. Even now, just real quick off topic, if, let's say, a seller doesn't want to let somebody into the property, like an appraiser, for instance, to appraise the property and they're doing a deal, if the loan belongs to Fannie or Freddie, okay, from the seller side, the purchaser could just do a bank could do it just a drive-by, okay, and that would suffice, the value of the property. Of course, it's a lender specific. It's conventional mortgages primarily, but just keep that in mind. If the seller doesn't want to let the appraiser into the property because of the COVID-19, they are doing drive-by appraisals to ease. Some banks are doing drive-by appraisals.
You can get away with a crime right now.
Say it again.
You can get away with a crime. You can get away with a crime right now. Iggy, I actually wanted to pick your brain, like, on this topic, considering that you also do mortgages, and we're dealing with clients right now who have a lot of these questions, and maybe you could give us some advice on the right way to approach this conversation, because everybody's like listening to the news right now and they're like, oh, we're 3 months, we don't have to pay mortgages. But you touched on a really important topic, that the more that these people delay these payments, the more, instead of them, like, whatever, it's for easy example, instead of them owing like $3,000 a month, they're going to get hit with a $9,000 payment at the end. And are you having these kind of conversations? And, like, what's the best education that you're doing? Because I think everybody that's on this call is going to be dealing with it sooner or later.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm 16 years in the industry. I could tell you one thing that, I lived through the 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I've seen, a lot of things going on right now. The way I see the deferment, and let's get one thing straight. There are banks, like I spoke to SPS, okay, it's a servicer. They were able to give me a 60-day deferment and extend my maturity date or add it to the end of the maturity date without any financial hardship or paperwork of any kind. I encourage everybody who has car leases also to call their car lease, because some of the car leases, like Lexus, for instance, did the same thing. They added the maturity date, and they extended it from August 2022 to October 2022. Okay, so basically I got 2 free months, April and May, okay? Whereas if you have to pay them back on, like you said, Mark, on the 4th month, my opinion is that the government's going to come out with something and say, continue deferring the payments until you get a solution of some kind of modification, some kind of repayment, a forbearance of some sort. And the forbearance could be a $500 payment until you get caught up, or when until you're reviewed for modification. I don't think everybody's just going to start defaulting right off the bat. But I do see a big default rate, because I think people, when they get the package, are going to wait for the 3rd or 4th month to actually submit the package. And the bank's going to take a long time to actually review it. I mean, being in the modification game and the foreclosure game for over a decade now, we've seen banks take up to 3 months or 5 months. I mean, short sales and modification, very similar packages you submit, except one I want to sell, one I want to keep my property, right? So,
right.
And it's the same package they're mailing out now to homeowners. And what makes things even worse, and I'm sure that a lot of the mortgage guys will agree, is that they're sending you a 4506T, which, I mean, right now, the IRS is not even executing these 4506T transcripts, requests for IRS transcripts, to confirm that, yes, indeed, your tax returns match up to your IRS filed returns. And that's an issue of its own. Does it affect the credit score, Tata asked. So during the deferment, there are no penalties, there's no interest due, and they're not reporting negative on your credit reports. But keep in mind, I actually had this conversation, and if Mark is watching, I think he is, with Mark Tippis for More Credit Solutions, and we're going back and forth kind of. And if you get a solution such as a loan modification, it does show up, the loan modification shows up on your credit report, right? So even though you're current on your mortgage, the loan modification would show up on your credit report. And for the mortgage aspect of it, if your loan was modified, you cannot refinance for a certain amount of years, or you can purchase a new property, conventional or FHA mortgages, for 2 to 4 years, depending on the program. So that it's kind of a catch-22 for a lot of people who are trying to refinance now, take advantage of the low interest rates, and then deferring the payments and then getting a modification that may unqualify them moving forward. Just keep that in mind, guys. Okay, David, you had a question? Good night. Can you unmute him?
Yeah, and I agree with everything you say with the deferment as for former, because I was saying, how is everybody going to pay a lump sum? what I'm hearing, I don't know if this is accurate information, that just like you said with the car payments, they're gonna, instead of having a 30-year mortgage, and I'm not a loan officer, I'm just, I'm hearing certain things, that they'll just add the 3 months, April, May, and June, to your 30-year mortgage, so that you would just continue paying the 1 month mortgage. Or I don't know what the government's going to do, if they're going to have everybody pay a lump sum. And I think that was the way that I heard some people talk about, but I don't know if that's 100% accurate. If they was going to add 3 months to the 30-year mortgage.
So that's the added to the maturity date. That'd be great. After 30 years, who cares? When you pay it off. What we've been hearing is that actually on the 4th month it's all due, but they're saying just we don't know yet. A lot of the banks, if you speak to them, they'll say we don't know. We don't know what we're gonna do, right?
Wow.
And what makes it worse is that back in the days we knew what the debt to income ratios they were looking at. We knew what the bank's guidelines are. Right now we have no idea. And we will know, and I'm sure there's going to be a stimulus package that's going to come out and give us more inside information about this scenario, and maybe even money to help the banks or bail them out a little bit, because they are taking a huge billions and billions of dollars a hit in this next 90 days, right? So they're going to want to recoup their money, and that's why lending, in my opinion, is getting tight. And non-QMs are non-funding right now, most of them. Even FHAs, those articles about FHA that Ginnie Mae loans are below 660, 640, some people say, are not funding as well. So just keep that in mind, moving forward.
And the strategy, one last question, that
sure, of course, the more the merrier.
The deferment is 3 months, that some people are going to strategically keep that money aside, don't spend it. You got to be financially, disciplined here. And
Sure.
what they'll do is they'll use that lump sum and add it towards their principal to make their principal go lower. And I'm not sure what the interest rates are going to, if the interest is also affected in this, but.
Dave, if I give you $1 a day and you put underneath your pillow and you put in your wallet, after 30 days, how many dollars you got in your pocket?
After 30 days, $30.
Zero. You know why? Because you'll spend it.
Oh, yeah.
Goes back to what you just said, right?
Yeah.
So it goes back to what you just said. I mean, at the end of the day, you're putting money aside. You got other bills to pay. People, when they start paying the mortgage, and they don't really save money for that rainy day. They'll just spend it on something else. So, especially if they have no income coming in, right? So their expenses, even though they're decreasing, they're still going to spend that mortgage money on something else. And that's pretty much, from my opinion, from my years and years of involvement, that's what I see all the time. Paycheck to paycheck, they're just not going to survive. So we just don't know. It's very uncertain right now. The only thing I can tell you is make sure you speak to the bank. If you get the hardship financial package, feel free to reach out to me to review it for you. But at the same time, fill it out to the best of your ability and send it in earlier than later, because the banks are taking longer to review. Even Wells Fargo told me that within 90 days, if they determine that you don't qualify, then then you have to start making your mortgage payments.
Wow.
So keep that in mind. The only good ones, like I said, is SBS that I've spoken to that added the 60-day. They gave me 60-day deferment, and then they added to the maturity date, so you don't have to actually pay it in lump sum. They just extended the maturity date. Same thing with the leases. Actually, like to send a letter agreement to defer your loan for 60 days, and you sign off on it. Make sure it's official, make sure it's on paper, make sure you spoke to somebody. There's Chase hotlines and everything like that talks about something different.
Great job.
Personal, Inga, your question is, personal loan can be used for covering mortgage. I'm not sure what that means, but there are SBA loans out there, the disaster relief. You could definitely apply for those if you need it. Through your corporations and whatnot. To kind of the forgivable loans. Any other question, guys? Gennady, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think we're coming to the end. The only thing, again, bird's eye view. Now that we've provided kind of the meat and the guts of the entire process, I like to again zoom out and take a look at everything from up above. In addition to the benefits of all of you of a short sale and of a foreclosure and the potential of these foreclosures and short sales that are going to be again coming into the market, I'd say by the last quarter of this year, we should also recognize and realize the benefits of a short sale and pursuing a short sale for the buyer. The buyers themselves have great benefits in pursuing a short sale. One of the biggest benefits is going to be that there is no judgment that's going to be filed against them, deficiency judgment, which is that amount, the difference between the amount of how much the property is sold for and the amount that is actually owed on the loan. So that's an amazing thing. Another great thing is that, hey, you don't have to go through the public stigma of going through the public foreclosure auction. You're, as the buyer, your judgments or any liens or any even miscellaneous debts may be paid off and satisfied as part of the short sale. If it's not the bank that's going to pick it up, it should be always negotiated that it's on the sellers, it's on the buyer's side to pick up these judgments, liens, and debts. If the buyer wants a good deal, the buyer should be responsible for the rest of the outstanding charges and debts that they're acquiring as part of this short sale. Credit rating. The credit rating is impacted a lot less with a short sale than a foreclosure auction. FHA lenders, are giving out loans to people 3 years after going through a short sale. So that's something that is an absolute positive. Another thing is your wall as a buyer, you're back right against the wall, against the timetable. There's time. You're working within a time frame that you're comfortable of, and you're working within a time frame that you understand, because you have the professionals around you that are explaining to you. You have a 60-day contract. You have time where the buyer needs to obtain a loan. These are all things that now we control as part of the contract process. So these are great. Remember, the seller doesn't care what the commissions are. The seller doesn't care what the sales price is if it's a short sale. The buyer has all these benefits. This is a way for the market to move the properties that are upside down. We're holding this seminar and we're talking about this right now, mainly for that. Recognize that there's this additional pool of opportunity for us all out there. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, and if we can help in any way, shape, or form, feel free to reach out to any one of us. Most importantly, right now, through what we're going through, stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, and stay indoors. Hope we were able to bring some value to everybody this afternoon, and hope to see everybody out there on the streets, mingling and networking in the near future. Take care, everybody.
Indeed, guys. Thank you so much for your question, guys. Awesome questions. And feel free, like I said, to message me or if you have any questions, I'll give my cell phone number, give me a call anytime. Time is something that we have right now. Let's use it wisely. And like I said, we're here for you guys. Anything you need.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Be well.